So we're going to talk about empathy today as a superpower in social interaction and communication. It can transform our relationships, it can transform our communication, and improve our communication outcomes. So essentially, by understanding other people's perspectives, we build trust and we end up bridging differences. Because at the end of the day, empathy is truly the foundation of meaningful human connection. So I'm going to share with you how cultivating empathy can make you a more effective communicator. And I'm going to give you strategies to help you do this. And I want you to keep in mind when we approach conversations with an open mind and heart and empathy, we are much better at being and having productive and constructive dialogues. So this is something that we should all really pay attention to and think about in our own communication. Are we leveraging the power of empathy? And if not, then these strategies I'm going to give you today are going to be a great place to start. So let's get into it. Okay, so first off, what exactly is empathy? You probably have heard the adage, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Sure, that's all great, but what essentially is that, right? It's the ability, right? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of other people, right? And there are actually two main types. We've got cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand another person's perspective and their point of view. And then we've got emotional empathy, which is the ability to feel and experience the emotions that another person is feeling, even if you are not directly experiencing those. And empathy is different from sympathy, which is feeling for someone, right? Whereas empathy is feeling with them. So we can see with this description of the brain scan that, there are active regions that are associated with empathy, including something called the anterior insula and the mirror neurons, which are both key to our ability to understand and share the feelings of others. And studies have shown that teams with higher levels of empathy perform 30% better on collaborative tasks. Empathy helps team members better understand each other's perspectives and thus work more effectively with each other. And it's also a core component of emotional intelligence, which probably doesn't come as a surprise, right? People with strong empathy tend to have better emotional regulation and also social awareness, which are valuable skills to have both in personal and in professional settings. So if you think of somebody that you can pinpoint as being socially savvy, they probably have high emotional intelligence, which is a very good thing. And also, they probably have quite a bit of empathy. Okay, so it's a powerful tool for improving communication and relationships. We talked about that, right? When we approach others with empathy, we can achieve 20% higher customer satisfaction. So if you are in that kind of industry where you're interfacing with customers and clients, this is something that you should certainly be leveraging. Right? Building empathy in our relationships also helps us create deeper and more trusting connections. We talk about building rapport, building trust, making sure that, we are being vulnerable, but also authentic. And of course, having that empathy component is really important with this. So you can see that it's a skill for success in all areas of life and of work. So it's something that we should absolutely start to incorporate in our communication if we haven't done so already. So what might be getting in the way of empathy? Well, there's digital disconnect. And research actually shows us that 15% of people report feeling a sense of something called empathy erosion due to excessive social media use. And this is something that where this disconnect from real human interaction can make it even harder to understand and relate to others, which probably has something to account for in the, if people see that there might be some negativity on certain social platforms. And you might wonder, well, why is that? Because we have human to human interaction here, but it's not quite the same, right? There's this digital disconnect. And when you're interacting through social media, there is not that high resonance of communication there. So people have more of a disembodied experience. That's not in any way condoning that kind of behavior, but it certainly might help explain it a little bit, even if it's quite mind bending, personally speaking, right? So there's also the stress and burnout, right? When we're feeling overwhelmed or we're feeling stressed, our capacity for perspective taking and empathy can actually really become diminished. So it's important to manage and mitigate your stress levels so that we can actually maintain our ability to empathize. Then there's bias and judgment, right? We all have preconceived notions and judgment and biases that really end up blocking our genuine understanding of others. So if you're aware of these biases, that is going to make it much easier to develop true empathy, right? So we should all set our biases aside and think about the other person as a human. And I think for the people who, you know, have a hard time doing that online, that's something that would probably be one of the first things to address, right? Think of the person that you're communicating with, even if it's through a screen, even if it's through comments, as a human, right? And would you want to be treated that way? So, things to think about. And then, of course, poor listening, right? Too often we're really focused on formulating our own response rather than truly listening and trying to understand the other person's perspective. So this is why really taking the time to improve active listening can go a really long way in building empathy. All right, so mastering empathy is a really crucial skill for building strong relationships and understanding others. And we've got 3 core skills that are going to help us become more empathetic communicators. So the first one is perspective taking, right? So as a reminder, that's the ability to see the world through someone else's eyes, considering their background, their fields of experience, their belief systems, their circumstances, their perspectives, essentially. And we all have different ways that we treat certain things, right? This is separate but related, symbiotic interactionism. And I have a whole set of videos about that. So if you want to do a deeper dive into that, I would recommend you check the symbiotic interactionism videos that are on the Explearning communication channel. But essentially, we need to understand someone else's perspective. And what this ends up doing is it allows us to have deeper understanding of where they are coming from, even if we don't agree. Okay, that is the key part of this. You don't have to agree with them, but you do need to try to understand them and show them respect. That's super important. And then, of course, active listening, right? That's focusing intently on understanding the other person, not just thinking about where you're going to respond and how you're going to come up with a great answer and show your intelligence and how cultured you are. You've got to pay attention to both their words and their emotions and really create a psychologically safe space for them to feel truly heard, because they're going to notice that you do that for them and they're going to do that for you. And then finally, emotional validation, right? This is acknowledging feelings without judgment, validating experiences, and again, even when we disagree. So acknowledging feelings without judgment and then validating those experiences, judgment aside. So The power of empathy is also a critical skill for workplace success, right? Because it can help resolve conflicts, it can help build customer trust, and also make leaders much more effective. So empathetic techniques have been shown to actually reduce team conflicts by 40%. That's huge. And also companies that provide empathy training to their employees will see and have seen a 26% increase in customer retention rates. That's also a big deal. And then leaders rated high in empathy have 40% higher engagement scores from their teams. So being an empathetic leader really pays dividends, and empathy allows you to understand people's perspectives. This helps you build stronger relationships and find common ground, build rapport, all of which are really important in the workplace. All right, so hearing, right, is just the passive reception of sound. That's different from listening, right? Listening is the active engagement with meaning. So when we're hearing, we often focus on formulating our response, or maybe turn taking, right? Waiting for our turn to speak and we wanting to share something. But in contrast, listening involves paraphrasing to show that we understand. We're also using nonverbal cues to demonstrate attention, and we're providing affirmations and discourse markers without any judgment whatsoever. So effective listening really requires us to move beyond selective focus and selective hearing and truly engage with the speaker's message, whatever they are transmitting, right? So this empathy exercise is going to help you, it just highlights the difference between passive hearing and active engaged listening, which is a crucial skill for building meaningful connections and also promoting understanding between us. So I want you to think about, are you listening or are you hearing? And if you catch yourself hearing, you want to switch to listening mode. So I challenge you with that. And speaking of a challenge, this is what I want you to focus on this week. Okay. First, I want you to choose an important interaction that you had today. So think back to the interactions you've had thus far, or at the end of the day, whatever time that is for you. Think back to an important interaction that you had today, and then applying these techniques to, okay, retroactively, so that you can do it for real the next time you have an interaction of that type. So I want you first to focus on understanding the person's feelings and their concerns, not just the facts. So not separating the facts from the person, but really focusing on those feelings and concerns in addition to the facts that they're sharing. And then I want you to reflect back, right? So reflect back with something like, I understand you're feeling frustrated. It sounds like you're feeling discouraged, things like that. And then I want you to note how this changes the connection and the clarity of the conversation. Once you start implementing that kind of language and also being more present, being more mindful, what does that do to that social interaction? I want to leave you with this. Empathetic listening takes quite a bit of practice, particularly if it's not your default mode. But it is a very powerful way to build stronger relationships and get the communication outcomes that you are seeking. So I encourage you to stick with it, to think about how, you're going to implement these types of strategies, and you will see that it's going to absolutely transform your communication and your relationships, both at work and in life. Right? As we said, teams with high empathy scores see a 30% boost in performance as they're better able to understand and address each other's needs. So implementing empathy training can also reduce conflict by up to 40% as people learn things from each other and see things from different perspectives that they hadn't even thought of. And companies that prioritize empathy in communication also see a 26% increase in customer retention because clients really feel truly heard and understood. So as you can see, empathy is not just a skill. it truly is a superpower, and that we all have this ability to cultivate it and to use it to our advantage. So if you're on a team and you're a leader, I would encourage you to encourage your team to start practicing empathy today, and also encourage yourself, right? Think about how you can start implementing these fantastic strategies and tools. And you can always watch the replay of this class to remind yourself of what we discussed today. So be sure to attempt the challenge, do the challenge, complete it. And if you're in our community, you can come and share your insights in our session, and you can also share them in our coaching call. So for all information about that, you can join us in Explearning Academy. You've got a 1-week free trial. You also can sign up for our newsletter so you can get all the information about the community and what's going on in there as well, because we send out those email communications as well. But the best place to learn about what's going on in the community is just by joining and, participating in the events. And if you want that ongoing support and you want the coaching and the feedback, then you are absolutely welcome to join us. All right. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in another Explearning lesson. Bye for now, everybody.